It's another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. But before we get into it, are you subscribed? If not, please make sure to subscribe, like and share the video and spread the word. Because the Christian Reeve Podcast is here to stay. I love doing this and I love all of you that support me. So thank you. And yeah, let's get into this podcast, shall we? Boom! Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a podcaster all the way from Baltimore, Maryland in the USA. His name is Chris Tondevold. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
I'm very good, man. I'm in a great mood. It's this is the 65th episode of the podcast, and it's not all about numbers, but I got to say, I didn't think we would get to this point. I didn't think we'd get past 10 episodes. It's like, yeah. And I mean, it couldn't be more fitting to have a fellow podcaster on the show to talk about this. Because
yeah.
That's the thing. I've had quite a few different podcasters on the show. I've had a range of different guests. And it's always cool just finding out when I'm interviewing a podcaster, because it's good to find out different people's approaches. Like, I never realized just how many different styles of podcasts there are and approaches.
Right.
Everything. It's pretty incredible. And you're the host of the Ambition Radio podcast. Did I get that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. So, I mean, I always check out the podcast before I do my when I'm doing my research. What we're talking about, and so I have a rough idea. But please just let us know what is this podcast about fundamentally, and what kind of topics do you tend to sort of cover on the show?
Sure. So I search for people that have found some kind of balance between their life, family, career, and the pursuit of their passions, dreams, or hobbies. So a lot of them are creatives, right? So trying to balance a 9-to-5 with trying to pursue what they're doing. Some of them have made it their own business, which is amazing because that usually doesn't happen, right? You're always on a grind somewhere. So that's also been really cool. So talking to everybody, I struggled a lot with motivation and staying on topic and executing on whatever ideas that I have. So part of it is also for me to kind of steal any kind of motivational or any kind of tips or tricks that I can use for my own life.
That's clever.
Yeah. So try to better myself by stealing everybody else's ideas that have already been done.
I mean, that's just human history in a nutshell, right there. Everyone goes, wow. Like, if you take music as an example, everyone's like, oh my God, that's an amazing song. And then someone who's older, who's been around a while, would be like, I fucking heard that song in the 70s. What are you talking
about? Right. And I used to book concerts locally around where I'm at. So a lot of the people that I talk to are musicians, just because it's like an easy kind of a bridge, but they're constantly working on something. So there's been a couple of them that are playing in 4 or 5 bands actively, and I just don't have an idea of how you even juggle anything with your life outside of that.
You can't. I've been a musician since I was 11 years old, and
right.
I remember one point where I was juggling a couple of projects, and here's the reality of the situation. You can do that, but it doesn't mean that you'll put the amount of effort and time that's required to actually make it worthwhile. And here's the thing, I should make a distinction. If you're a session musician, that's different. Because in theory, depending on how OP you are and how practiced you are, you can potentially do that. You can manage several projects. It'll be tough, but you can pull it off. But if you're a musician who is writing for bands and being part of the creative process, you just can't. 2 projects, maybe. Even the very best musicians rarely find the time for their side project. Do you know what I mean? It's like a joke among musicians.
Right. They have to quit their main act for the most part just to pursue what they want to do with the solo stuff. So it's very, very difficult to also stretch yourself creatively and different ways to think about yourself and different ways to express yourself. It's cool that you can have all these different avenues, but you're legitimately breaking yourself in shards at that point, and you'll never be whole. So it's
it's so true.
It's wild. It's definitely wild. So it's been fun learning a little bit more about everybody's approach to how to juggle all that stuff and to keep motivated despite anything else that's happening with their life.
I got to just add on to that music tangent for a
Yeah.
second that like the amount of drummers I've met over the years that say this. Oh yeah, I'm in like 4 different bands. I'm like, okay, yeah, and you know, God's gonna come visit my house next week. Go fuck yourself. Like, come on.
What always amazes me is that there's so many drummers, and I don't understand why, because it's the biggest instrument, the loudest instrument. Who let you bang on things in the house? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got electric drums, which is still shit, but you can. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember having an electric drum kit in one time, and it kind of worked. I mean, it pissed off my mum to no end, but it kind of, you know, it worked. But
Right.
yeah, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. And I remember all the drummers that I met over the years. There was always some sort of hang up with their parents, like, oh, well, you know, they only let me drum at these times, and
Right.
oh, you know, like I have to do X, Y, and Z, and there was always something. It was never just like I have my own place and that's it, you know.
Yep. Yep.
Really, you need like those super liberal drug smoking parents that are like, yeah, man, like it's a party. Go drum where you want. It's 3 a.m. Great. Yeah, let's start now. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but
yeah, I mean, you want your parents to support you in your artistic endeavors, right? You want that to happen. But as a parent, I know that if you're hitting some China cymbals at any time in the morning, it's over. You're gonna be kicked out. Like, you're gonna go do that in the woods. I don't care anymore.
So you say you're a father then? Is that right?
Oh no! But if I did have kids, I would
okay.
also abandon them in the woods. So whatever, it'll be fine.
Okay. Holy shit! I mean, I gotta say, I would be a very liberal parent just because of how my childhood was. But at the same time, there are certain things you want to like steer them away from your mistakes as much as possible. I think like if you're a parent, I mean, it's difficult obviously because we're not parents. It's
Right.
but like at the same time, I think it's fair. Like if you do anything to restrict your kids, then 9 times out of 10 they're going to rebel against that. Like, you know, because my mom was so liberal with me. I mean, that's not to say that I didn't fuck around and do shit that I shouldn't.
Right.
But I was a pretty good kid because, you know, she never restricted me. And I always felt super bad when I lied to her. So I made sure to not do that as much as I possibly could.
Yep.
And that kind of rebellious phase, if you like, didn't last very long. And for the most part, I was very, you know, a good kid. And I think that's part of it. It's not like saying like, hey, yeah, great, go out and do drugs, go out all late night. But if you kind of say, okay, I'm trusting you, that's a good example of, you know, building proper trust. And then if they break that trust, you show them the consequences of breaking that trust. And, you know, I mean, it certainly is a better model versus, okay, you can't ever go out and do anything. You're totally restricted.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Like, I remember my mum telling me about her childhood and how, like, when she was much younger, I think she was like early 11, 12, something like that.
Okay.
And she would say like, oh, you know, I wouldn't want to go out with my friends, go swimming or go play, I don't know, whatever. And apparently my nan, God bless you, would say things like, no, she'd just say no, you can't do that. And my mum would just, basically, my mum told me that she essentially got bullied for that. Like,
Really?
Well, because the other kids would be like, ha, you can't go out, ha, like, you know. And because kids are like that, every kid is an asshole. We all know that.
Yes.
But it's like, do you know what I mean? So, and that's the reality. That's what happens. You restrict your kids, they're going to get bullied the shit out of.
Right.
Don't restrict them. Okay, it's a risk. You worry, but look, we've all been kids at some point, and we know how it works.
Yeah, we're not dead, right? And we'll be fine. Go experience life. It'll be all right. I do always think about like, if any parent is super, super liberal, like, do their kids turn into like a hard right Christian? Because I wanna see that rebellion period of them just being super pious and going against all the hippies.
Oh, you mean they go so liberal that they
Yeah.
become conservative and they're like,
So if the parents are letting them do whatever and supporting them with everything, and they're so liberal, do the kids in rebellion, in an act of rebellion, just go hard Christian right?
it's
So
like, oh, you've subjected me to all this hellishness. I need God to save
Right.
me.
yeah, your kid's 5 and then just talking about how all this is Sodom and Gomorrah, and you're like, how did you even know about this? You're 5. You don't know what those words are.
Oh, that's fucked. Yeah, that's fucked. Oh, man, I love these tangents. Okay, let's bring it back to your podcast. So,
right.
What are your goals and aspirations for your podcast?
The main goal for me is to always just connect with people and have good conversations. That's the main goal. So I don't have lofty aspirations as far as numbers, success, or anything like that. This is at the very base level a record for me personally for these connections that I'm developing, right?
Okay.
And the other part about that for me is that if I can get traction audience-wise, I want to bring everybody up around me. So one of the main goals for me is to actually do a better spotlight of all the businesses that are around here, all the different artists that are happening. And so with my ability to try to talk to anybody from any kind of different walk of life and being able to let everybody else know that there's much more happening here than like crabs and that's it. Like crabs and Old Bay is the thing that Maryland is known for, and it's there's a lot more in here. So that's the other part of it for me, is trying to shine a spotlight on those that don't maybe have that actual exposure piece.
What about more specifically for 2021? Do you have any sort of particular goals earmarked?
So my goal for 2021 was to release weekly episodes, and that didn't happen so far. So we're gonna start that again this week.
What's been the struggle there? What's
legitimately just balancing work and life, and then the podcast by itself. So I do all my own editing and all that good stuff. So it sucks. And it's the least part, or the least favorite part for me. I've learned a lot, which is great. So that's definitely a skill that I've developed. But at the same time, it's so much work hearing your own dumb voice over and over and over again.
Yes.
And I just don't want to do it. So I have to like shut off from the whole world and try to focus on it as much as possible.
You know what I find interesting, right? This is just me personally, is I can listen to my own voice in the context of editing and stuff and hearing stuff back just to make sure it's fine. But as soon as, like, I don't know, like, for example, I have a housemate, right, who doesn't speak good English. He's from abroad. He's the guy's crazy, man. He's come over from Brazil and he doesn't speak a word of English, and he's just throwing himself into it. And I'm like, fair play. Like,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he's really busting his ass. I could do a fucking podcast about him. Yeah. But anyway, he's a big music fan, right?
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, we get on like a house on fire. And one day I walk into the kitchen or dining room area, and I see him watching videos of mine. And I don't know why, ever since I was a kid, like first playing with videos, I get really shy when people are watching stuff of mine. I can't stand it. For something, it's something about the audience of that situation. I'm like, no. Oh, turn that shit off. Let's listen to something good. Like, you know, I hate hearing myself around other people. You know, it's fine if it's just me sitting there editing or whatever, because you have to do it. But like,
it's you being in the audience of your own show and cringing at everything. Just the whole thing.
I don't know why I hate it so much. Like, it's embarrassing, and people always like, his reaction is no, it's good, and I'm like, no, it's not. Please turn it off.
That feel is very much real. It also, so for me, it also kind of hinders the whole production process too sometimes, where nothing that I'm doing is making this sound good. Nothing that I'm doing is making this more meaningful. And you just get kind of into a rut a little bit with that, because you're just like, what am I missing? I've done this 50,000 times as far as the editing process. I know how to dial in the sound, but for whatever reason, it's just not clicking. And then that is definitely like when you're playing that back, that's one of the other things that messes with your mind. But I cannot imagine. Well, I can't imagine. So the intro episode of the show, I just threw that out there, and I didn't even edit anything really for it. Just wanted to do that. So my friends decided to play that for me.
Oh no.
At their house with a group of people, and counted every single in that whole 5-minute intro along with me.
Please tell me they turned it into a drinking game.
Yeah, but
you shit-faced after like 20 minutes.
There was 47 of them, so they stopped after a little bit, and yeah, that was very, very embarrassing, because it's just like, okay,
that's mean. You guys are mean. Because everyone fucking pauses I mean, you can't just speak like like, you know. People tell me that I'm good at holding a conversation. Do you know what I do? I have fucking research and questions lined up. That's why there's no because I know that would A, suck, and B, you know, you have to have some sort of flow. But these are the things that you learn through doing this. It's not like
I also learned post-production and to take all those out. Yeah. But that, to your point, you know, if you're more prepared and you're more concise and you know how to flow with the conversation, you can keep it going without all these crazy pauses. And even with that, you can actually just pause instead of saying those filler words sometimes. So, and that makes it a little bit easier too.
Yeah, it's all just part of the journey and the process. I mean, you know, like you said, like there's the cringe at the first episode. I'm sure if I look back at my original episodes, yeah, I mean, I still stand by all of them, but like at the same time, I noticed that there's been a degree of change over time, because it's natural. You know, you find a flow, you find a rhythm, you go, okay, this is how we do it. This is what feels comfortable, or whatever the case may be. Yeah,
it's all fine tuning and polishing, right? So, and
exactly.
you learn with the experience. And I think the main thing with that, especially if it's an interview piece, you are just learning how to connect in different ways, and also active listening. Like that is such a big thing, to where you can even repeat what they say, you can write notes, whatever you want to do. But if you're actively listening and then being able to pinpoint where you want the conversation to go, that is a skill that you have to develop.
Yeah, I never knew that this was a thing. Like, okay, people think it's really easy podcasting, but and I think I might have said this on the podcast before one time. I do this sometimes. I repeat myself, but
right.
So I try not to. But since we're talking about podcasting, go figure.
Right.
So yeah, this active listening thing. Yeah, you're spot on with this. This is a skill I think I learned in the first couple of episodes, because there was this thing where, you know, you have your research of what your questions you're going to ask, right? And you think, oh yeah, it'll go in this order, and perfect, no problem. And then they mention something which is like, what, 3/4 of the way down, and you're like, well, I could circle back to this, but if we do like, say, 20 minutes on this thing, and then I randomly go, oh yeah, remember you were talking about this thing like 5 hours ago, let's talk about that. You can't. You got to kind of switch it up and jump and learn to jump around and almost like I guess like mold around your guest, if that's the right word, or just, adapt. That's the word I'm looking for, not mold. What the fuck am I saying?
That it's the same kind of thing, right? So you want to be able to adapt on the fly and kind of keep it going. But, you know, to your other analogy, if you are down a certain path as a tangent or anything like that, you want to keep that going, because that's where a lot of the good stuff comes from, right? So you want to mold the conversation around that for sure, and then hopefully go through whatever other actual questions that you have. Now, for me, I usually don't do a whole lot of research beforehand.
Oh.
So this is an interesting aspect of it, and I think I've developed this conversational skill through my sales job for the most part, right?
Ah, that's okay.
So yeah,
That's
so
where it is.
you can kind of see that where I can connect with random people all the time and start talking and basically put on a show, right? Because it's almost like a different personality between being on a mic or being in front of a customer and falling into yourself and enjoying what you actually like, which is not talking to anybody. So
It's so true. So true.
so yeah, with all of that, it's interesting to me always, and I've seen where it can definitely benefit me and it can actually be my detriment, where if I research too much, then I overthink too much and I
Hmm.
don't let the flow of the conversation go. Sometimes though, one of the conversations I had recently that'll come out in probably a couple months or a month or so, whatever. I found myself during the conversation not knowing where to go
Ooh.
until we started going into more of the passion and the motivation part of it. So with that, like I could have definitely researched more and asked better questions for that instead of just getting like a broad history of it.
Hmm.
So it was definitely a learning experience for me, and I knew like during the conversation that I'm gonna have to chop some of this stuff up and get in a better flow, which some people think about. Most audience members don't. They just hear the final product and don't know any of the actual work that was put into it. So I like the free form a lot, and I try to like keep it as casual as possible. And I'm always thinking of another question in my head. But it is always interesting to me to hear about the other side of that, where you are fully preparing all the way through.
That's the thing. I mean, for me personally, I do a mixture. So a lot of the
Yeah.
questions, even some of the questions I've asked you already, it's ad lib. It's based on, here's like a rough idea, so that at no point am I lost and go, oh, what do I do? Right. That
Right.
this is to protect from that, and also to have an idea of, okay, who is the person that I'm talking to? I'm going to learn more, but what's a basic outline of this person?
Yeah.
And then, as you say, the free form. I mean, ideally, yeah, you want a big conversation to go to get going. And I found that throughout the course of doing this podcast, there's been times when I don't even ask certain questions. I maybe that'll be for a return episode, maybe not,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, but it's more about asking the questions that matter most and that trigger things. Get like a certain line of thinking, or as you say, like a certain tangent to open up. And obviously, yeah, if you're talking about things that are passionate to either yourself or your guest, sky's the limit on where that
Right.
conversation can go. So yeah, totally agree with you on that one. Um, yeah, bringing it back to podcast. Well, we've never stopped talking about podcasting. That's my usual thing that I say to bring it,
Yeah.
back or whatever. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're not paying attention. Wake up, wake up.
Well, I got a question for you, if that's all
Oh,
right.
yeah,
Do
go
you
for it.
ever do you ever think about after your conversation is done, your episode is done, recorded, I could have asked A, B, and C. Maybe I should reach out again to maybe get those answers.
No, the only thing I've ever encountered is we could do more.
Yeah.
And I've had guests who've said, like, there's been certain guests that I've had where it's like, there's chemistry here. And it's not to say that, because like the thing that I pride myself on most is, can I get my guest to feel comfortable? Because
Right.
if I can, who knows? And I've had guests that are really chatty. I've had guests that are a bit more introverted. And I'm really proud when I get the more introverted ones to feel a bit more comfortable. Like
Yep.
that to me is like a real challenge every single time. And yeah, when there it gets like a long discussion, or I have to kind of, because yeah, you do have to kind of limit your guests' tangents to some extent, because you can't go
Right.
too far off the beaten track. You got to kind of keep it steered to some extent. But then I just think in my head, okay, we can do more with this, and I've got
Yeah.
some people penciled in for the future. Like, like there's this one guy that I had that's a business guy. He's like a CEO,
Mm-hmm.
and he straight after the podcast, he was like, yeah, let's do round two. And I'm like, yes, but I want to give it some time, and I want to think about it. And I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, what can we do? And then when I've scripted out something, an idea, then I'm going to hit him up with round 2. So that's probably as close as it gets for me. Luckily I don't have that. I think that I always just try to focus on the vibe and what's going down, and think about like, well, what do I really want to know? What would the audience really want to know? And I try to look at it like that. Like, that's why, like, it's good to have a script, but I don't stick to it like so rigidly that it's like the Bible or something. I try to kind of think like, this is a guide, but what matters most is what can I get out of the guest?
For sure. Yeah.
So, yeah. But what do you like about podcasting? Like, why are you doing this?
Definitely the conversations. I mean, that the conversations and the connections. That's the what I like the most. So when I started listening to podcasts, the first thing that I really gravitated towards was Pete Holmes' "You Made It Weird" podcast, and it is an incredibly long form conversational interview podcast that can go on for like 3 or 4 hours. And I was like, I can probably do that, but I'm not going to do it that much. And it was really just like me listening to a whole bunch of interview shows and being like, okay, I'm not booking gigs actively anymore. I stopped doing that. How else can I kind of give back at all and do something for me too that gives me a little bit of a creative outlet? And so I kicked around this idea for probably like 3 or 4 years before I actually did it. And then I recorded stuff, and about 6 to 9 months later, I actually released it. So it's doing it over and over and doing it for those connections has been really cool. And that's the main thing that keeps me going, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the guests that you've had on the show. Like, obviously you mentioned you've had musicians predominantly and stuff, but like, are there any particular guests that stand out? And, was it because of who they are, or maybe some of the things that you touched on, maybe some thought-provoking stuff or deep stuff? Like, talk to us about some of the best moments on your podcast so far.
So one that always comes to mind is a musician named Justin Miles, and he does tap as well as music. And
that tap dancing.
Tap dancing, yeah. So
cool.
We talked about how his time with Stomp. I don't know if you remember the old school music plays where they would use rakes, brooms, big gallon drums to make all the music. So he did some of that, and then he tap danced for this group called Tap Dogs, and they played. They're from Australia, but they played all around the world, and I saw them in DC at the Kennedy Center. It just blew me away, the whole production and everything in there. And I always think about tap dancing as like a very old school stuffy thing, but they made it amazing. So one of the things that he was doing too was Disney cruises. So he would play on the Disney cruises as an actor, and I think he didn't play Aladdin, but he played one of those close to the top stars in there. But he was talking about how you do it every night, night after night after night, and you're trapped on that boat. Like, you have to. That's the whole experience. Like, it's such a harrowing experience in my mind, because you're doing the same thing over and over again, and you can't break free from it. And that, like, if you don't actually like enjoy what you're doing, it's such a grind. So you see like the life being taken out of them a little bit. He was saying it was good money and all that stuff. So that blew me away as far as just that thought of it, because I don't think anybody ever thinks about those cruises, those entertainer cruises. That's such a grind in there to go through night after night and be perfect. You have to be perfect every single night, because it's either a new audience or a repeat audience where they've seen it before, and now they want to expect that greatness every time. So that stuck with me for sure. One of the other things that always stuck out to me is when I interviewed Malcolm and Marie Andrews. They have a foundation called PAND, which is Parents Against Negligent Daycare, and they lost their 2-year-old son by drowning in a pool in their caretaker or daycare. That's what I was looking for, at their daycare. So not their daycare, but the people that they put in charge, right? So now they're trying to go through everything. So that was just a very like emotional, deep thing in there. So I think for me, like being able to explore all the different pieces of that, from either just like what you may or may not think about entertainers to even something like that where their whole mission is to make sure that these standards are everywhere for every daycare across the nation. So that to me is definitely like the coup de grace for it as far as that goes.
I just want to ask you like one question about that situation. Like, did that carer, um, did they get like prison time for that, or like what was the case there?
I
The
don't.
outcome?
Yeah, I don't necessarily remember, but I know that they sued on a civil side of it for sure. I think that there was some legal punishments to it, but this was a couple years ago, so I've unfortunately forgot about it. What they've done so far though is taken that, because it's the liability access of it, and making sure that everybody who is in charge is on the hook for stuff like that. A lot of them, it has to go through like the different licenses, and whether you're in DC versus Maryland, where they were in DC. So there was a couple different things legally with it that was all gray and murky, and I'm not entirely sure what the full outcome of it was for that care. But they've just taken it and tried to actually lobby for more stricter laws for this, and more culpability and liability for the actual providers for it.
Damn. It's just
Yeah.
such a crazy thing to think about. Like it's one thing if like, and because I mean, in fairness, it could just be a genuine accident, but like just thinking about that, you pay these people to look after your kids, and then your
Yeah.
kid dies in their care, and it's like, damn, man, like wow, it's
Yeah.
just
Sorry to bring it down, but
no, no, no,
that's
no, 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 dude, like you can't bring me down. Like honestly, I do volunteering at this place, like every Monday, dealing with like the homeless and destitute and
okay.
stuff. I see some really like heavy shit,
Yeah.
and I actually this week I saw something, and I even went and made a video about it, and then I deleted it, and I was like, I'm still unsure if I'm gonna talk about it or not. Like it just kind of, like every now and again you see something in life and it just like sticks with you.
Yeah.
It's like the worst side of humanity and the things that we tend not to think about. But it kind of just for the whole day, I just couldn't shake it. And I just really, reinforced why I do volunteering. And I was like, well, at least we were able to do something for this person.
Right. Right.
But at the same time, it was kind of like, fuck, man, like this sort of stuff shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's like
life.
that. It's like that dog meme where he has like these white eyes and he's just so fucking shocked. So he looks like he's just gone through the ringer on
Oh
everything. You
yeah,
know what I'm talking about?
TSD meme thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that, I mean, that, like, that dog just reflects so much of just the face of everybody that's legitimately like seen some shit in there, and just like that experience in there, because it's, you don't really shake it completely, I don't think. It's always part in the back of your mind, and it can creep up in there for sure. So it's tough, and it's whether or not you like use that for inspiration to do something,
Mm.
right? So kind of like what you're talking about with the volunteering and stuff, or do you just say, man, the world fucking sucks, doesn't it, and just keep going?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I'm learning about life, because it's like, when you're a kid, you're really protected from life. Your parents. It's not like they lie to you, but you slowly find out as you grow up, like, okay, maybe it's not as great as what it looks like in the cartoons. And then, you know, then you start doing history class, then you start doing this and that. And, you know, unfortunately, yeah, for some of us, that trauma, I don't think any human being doesn't experience some sort of trauma in their life. I think everyone does, but the extent to which they experience it and in the way, what age, all of these different things varies. You know, like I feel like I've been very lucky in my life, but there are some things that have happened where I look back on it now and I'm like, that's pretty fucked up. You know, like that's, yeah. And I wonder, like, maybe there's something wrong with me. Like I don't react to it. But then it depends, because we all deal with things in different ways. Like,
Right.
I think for me, maybe the reason I'm okay is that, you know, I kind of go through the motions. I feel emotions. Like, you know, if I feel sad, I feel sad. I don't try and hide it. If I'm happy, fuck yeah, I'm happy. You know, I remember one time, I've told this story before, but I remember I was sitting there with my dad and one of my younger brothers. I think he was like 5 at the time. He was just having like a bit of a tantrum. He was stressed out. He was upset. And I sort of turned to my dad and I was like, why don't you say something? Why don't you, you know, try and discipline him? And he's like, no, I'm going to let him experience that. It's important that he feels that. And then he just didn't say anything else. And I kind of sort of realized what he meant. It was like, you can't always go through life like trying to suppress everything. You need to know, like, okay, this is how I feel when I feel sad or depressed. This is how I feel when I feel happy. You need to know the distinction so that you can kind of learn how to deal with each. You know, like, for example, you know, when I'm depressed, I tend to kind of do the obvious things like eat chocolate, watch something funny, you know, listen to some good music. But there's other things as well, like exercise with the endorphins and stuff. Or, you know, sometimes one of the things I do is I work extra hard, which is a bit dangerous because I'm a bit of a workaholic, but it does kind of help. It weirdly, like, that sense of purpose and organization and goals is so much healthier than saying, do you know what, I'm going to sit here, get trashed and fuck it. It's like, that's great for like a day or two. And then, but before long, you've got a bit of a problem on your hands, you know?
Pouring yourself into work has helped, definitely for me personally, for sure, because it makes you focus on something that's not bringing you down. And if you can really invest in what you're doing, then all those kind of thoughts of what else happened isn't quite there. So they're just kind of at bay for the most part, because then it can definitely creep up right when you're done with work. But if you never stop working, it's fine, right? So that's how that works.
So it's like, I think the best way to explain it for people that don't quite understand is like, it's like heartbreak. Like, if you loved someone, you never truly get over them. You just learn to live without them. Same with death. When someone dies too young and you're like, oh, fuck, you know, it's like, I have friends that have committed suicide over the years. If I think about them, I get sad. I think, fuck, man, they should be here. Like, this sucks. When I think about people I had relationships with in the past, and I'm like, yeah, man, that sucked. It didn't work out. And, you know, and the weird thing about your mind is that you know, like, well, you know, we weren't right for each other. These are all the reasons why, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can sit there and be logical about it. But there's a difference between what the brain is saying and what the heart is saying. The heart's like, yeah, but what about the good times and how you felt and this and that? And it's like, you got to try and have the right mix of the two, I think.
Yeah.
The best way is like, do you know what? If I reminisce and I feel this is how I feel, I'll embrace that sadness, you know, and I'll embrace the happiness. And I think it's all about embracing, you know, people like, I think, and it's a generational thing. I think we're finally getting to a point now where it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry, whatever. Like, you can express that. Whereas, like, I remember when I was growing up, like, no one ever came out exactly and said, you know, you can't do this. But like, there was that macho bullshit and like, oh, crying is weak and men don't do that. And it's almost like, you know, showing that you're sad is a weakness, which is bullshit. Like, if anything, I think it's if you can't show your emotions, that's a weakness, especially if you're trying to be in a relationship as well. Like, the other person needs you to be empathetic, needs you to be able to show that you understand them. And if you can't even like understand yourself and embrace your own emotions, how the hell are you going to embrace their emotions?
This is very, very true. It's something that I've dealt with for quite a long time, because it's I always try to hide stuff because that's what I don't want out in the world.
Right.
But it's always a dual-edged sword, where you want to make sure that whoever you're around, they know that you care about them, and vice versa, right? But if you aren't a very outward person or forthcoming person with that, it's tough to continue to build those relationships and continue to have connections that actually grow and bloom into something. So being reserved doesn't help anyone, because then your communication piece of what you're doing is just, there isn't one. So then everything sucks, because you're upset that they don't talk to you, and they're upset that you don't talk to them, and now you're just like, well, this was all my doing. This was all my decisions. Why am I doing this? So that all of that I'm sorting through. Well, it's been like 10 years since I've sorted through it, but it's an ongoing process, I think.
You're so right about that communication thing, man.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of times I've spoken to someone after the fact and been like, this is how I felt. And they're like, I had no idea. Or worse,
Right.
if like, you you go, oh, you were like this, you ignored me, you were this, that, and the other. And it's like, did you turn around to me and tell me this? No, I didn't. Well, then.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You need to just literally, and it's a good way of finding out if people are worth your time and should be in your life. Because if you come to someone, you say, hey, I have a problem, this is how I feel, and they're like, whatever, or go fuck yourself, then you know
Yeah.
where you stand, and
Yep.
don't bother with that person. But if you have someone who's like, okay, and they sit down and they listen and they're there for you, there you go, that's a friend. It's so
Yeah.
simple. But I suppose, like, we're so preoccupied with fear and, oh, what if this happens? Oh, what about this? What about this? What about, oh, no. And it's like, fuck the fear, man. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Well, and I have a tendency to get distracted and not talk to people. So that's always a problem, where like I'll just be working, and I don't want to talk to anybody when I'm working, because I'm always talking to a customer, right? So that right there, and then coming home and just being like, okay, I've talked to enough humans today. I don't need to talk to anybody else.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So when that happens, there can be like a block of time where I don't talk to a person, and especially if it was just like a fledgling, hey, we matched on whatever, and now I quote unquote ghost on you. Now I feel terrible, and now all that fear that you were talking about, and that anxiety of just being like, should I reach out to them and like apologize? Should I just cut it off? Like, they haven't reached out to me. Should I reach out to them? I don't know what I'm doing with my hands now, and yeah, it's all like a lost cause. So that's happened to me over the years, like a bunch of times, and I just get focused on work and then stop talking to people, and then boom, now I don't know what I'm doing with anything.
It's so important to understand that as humans. Like, I think so many of us miss that. Like, I remember, when I was a kid and I'd go stay with my dad, like, he's a barber by profession.
Okay.
And he's a business owner as well. So he's got like, it's just like super stressful. Plus he's got kids, just like no time. And I remember there was a point where it was kind of sad. I mean, it's much better now. He's in a good place. But back then, he was just stressed the fuck out. He's working Monday to Saturday, sometimes Sundays. Sometimes he was just literally working every single day. Plus 3 kids, a marriage, you name it. And when I was seeing him, obviously I didn't see him often. We didn't live together, so it was special. And it kind of sucked. Like, I'd be there on a Saturday, and he'd come home from work, and he'd just fall asleep on the sofa. He was knackered, exhausted. And I remember feeling like, like, oh, like feeling bad for myself. Like I feel like such a prick now. Like Jesus, like But I was a kid. I was younger. I didn't understand.
Right.
Now I understand that he was exhausted. But do you know what? It wasn't so much from the cutting of the hair. That's easy. A haircut takes 20, 30 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
It was the fact that he had to constantly talk and be a sales guy and be a therapist or whatever the fuck. Like he had to just, there's so many other professions out there that do this, like bartenders or whatever. Like
Yeah.
you have to do that, and it's exhausting. And people don't appreciate like just how much energy it takes to just talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like,
I've had jobs where I can turn my brain off and just physically work.
yeah.
And physical exhaustion is completely different from mental exhaustion.
Yes.
And the job that I have now, it's all mental nonsense. And like what you're talking about, playing shrink, playing, therapist, trying to get all this stuff going. And it's so different, and it hits you to where your body doesn't fail. It's still there, but mentally you're just drained, emotionally you're drained, and you fall into yourself. At least I do. And you just don't want to people at all for the next like 24 to 48 hours at least. And the unfortunate thing is that you got to get up and do it again and like keep pushing through and keep pushing through. So you can develop this kind of, like I said, almost like split personality where you're putting on a show, right? And it's just exhausting putting on that show day in and day out.
Yeah, and I've said this on the podcast before, so sorry for repeating, but like, it's something that comes up often. The fact of the matter is, if you're having a conversation that you enjoy, talking about things that you like talking about, it's fun. After we're done, after an hour or 2 hours, I'll feel fine afterwards.
Yeah.
But do you know what? If I was working that sales job, which, I've worked in customer services, so I do understand. Like, yeah, you're having conversations you don't want to have. You're talking to people who are closed-minded, who you try and tell them again and again, no, we can't do it this way. Well, this is our policy. Well, it's like this.
Right.
And they're not reasonable, normal people. They're like, oh, but this, oh, but that. And it's just a fucking nightmare. A lot of it is dealing with stupidity and dealing with people who just don't understand, like, yes, no, this is it, blah, 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 right? And there's nothing you can do about that. Like you say, you have to kind of use this split personality. You have to, like, but when I was working customer services, it wasn't me. It was, Christian, the bartender, Christian, the fucking grocery boy, whatever. Like, it's just a different person. Sometimes I find that, like, if I'm doing presenting for the show, like, at the beginning of the show, like, hey, welcome to the podcast. Like, it is still me, but it's like, as you say, you're putting on a show, you're putting on a performance. But oh God, it's so bad. Do you know what? Since we're talking about your job, I want to quiz you more about this. So okay. You're a salesman, right? Is that right? Yeah. Can you specify like what industry or?
Yeah, I sell phones for a living, so I manage a cell phone store.
Okay, so I know a little bit about this.
All right.
This is one of the most stressful sales positions probably to have. It's frontline as well, so you're like in the store, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Your whole life is on that phone. Your whole life, and when it doesn't work, your whole life just crashes, and you come into the store and you're just like, fix it. And we can try, but normally it's going to be something different that you're not going to be happy with.
This is something I haven't thought about, actually, because, back in the day, a sales position at a phone place was just, oh, okay, can it ring? Does it have minutes? Okay, great.
Right.
How many years have you been doing this? How many, like,
10.
how long? 10. Okay, so you would have started around 2011, 2010, something like that. Okay. And in that time, has it, obviously it's changed, but like, I guess I'm asking the obvious here, but like, has it just become more and more and more stressful because of the nature of what you just outlined? Or like, was it easier back then, or, how's it changed?
So when I first started, Blackberries were a thing. And, and then the iPhone 4 had just came out is when I first started. So that kind of gives you an idea of the technology that was back then kind of compared to what it is now. So when I first started, I was a tech, and all I did was fix phones, and we physically fixed them in the store for the most part, or did a replacement device day and date for that we kept in the store. We don't do that anymore. Everything has shifted, uh, and a lot of it is just the technology whole aspect of it, where there's leaps and bounds every 3 to 6 months with all this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's insane how much stuff is coming out, and there's no way for anybody to keep up with repairs or anything like that. So all of that is just insane, and especially with the phones nowadays, you can't remove the batteries or anything like that. So there's a there's a lot more to it where you have to look at replacing every single one almost.
Well,
Um,
talk us through the process a little bit. So, before, yeah, you said that it used to be a non-store thing, which that sounds like a fucking nightmare, having to fix the phone in front of the customer. Like, screw that.
yeah, yeah.
But so what do you like? Tell them to go away for a couple of hours and then go fix it
Oh no,
somewhere
no,
else, or what's the
no.
deal?
So a lot of them just get replacement devices.
Oh, okay.
So if they're, and that's where the whole culture shift has or the approach has changed, where because these devices are full body, you can't replace just the parts. You have to replace the whole device. And there's a couple things that are happening in the world where they're trying to fight for a right to repair, because that repair process for your normal consumer is incredibly difficult. They have to actually find someone that is licensed by whatever company to actually replace and these parts. So especially if it's an Apple device, those Apple devices are so restrictive and so small on the inside that it's you can't replace anything in there. So instead of having to just replace a couple parts and redo that, we're replacing the whole phone every single time, and then you have to transfer all of your life from one device to another device. And it is that's that stress right there of the importance of cell phones in every day is the biggest thing that has impacted, I think, the overall cellular industry, where there was a time where all we cared about were phone calls, and
Mm.
then text messages came, and then emails came, and now we have TikTok, we have Snapchats, we have all this stuff. So we're constant,
Essentials.
right, essentials. But we're constantly engrossed in our phones. So if that is such like an ingrained part of our being, you have to think about just the exponential stress on those different companies that are trying to navigate while also producing more stuff for you to look at your phone with. So it's a dual-edged sword with that, where you have to, as a full company, and I'm just talking in general, where I think every cell phone company is thinking about this, where they need to think about the consumer first, because we're not selling a product that you can just buy at a store for the most part. You're not going into Walmart for the most part and just picking up a phone off a rack. You know what I mean? There's a lot of setup process for that. There's everything for it. So it's much more of a personal consultant job tied in with a therapist job, tied in to now this person's whole life is crashing before their eyes, and now I have to try to reconcile with that and help them when nothing is going right because it's technology and technology sucks. So it's very stressful for the front lines, and I think it's even more stressful to think about the overall shift in company mindset that everybody needs to have. Put consumers first, but also to be able to navigate all these different ways to bring content and what you can do to get it faster, more immediate, more in their hands every second of every minute of every day. So it's a lot.
Let's get to the fun bit. Tell us what sucks about this job. Have some fun with it. Worst
Yeah,
story,
yeah.
worst customers. Go for it, man.
I think really the only thing that really irritates me now is, especially in this day and age with the pandemic and all that, is people still not caring about other people. So if you're trying to come into a retail store without a mask,
Yeah.
that is not how we roll. Like, put a mask on, protect your other people. And just that like blatant disregard, I think, whether you believe it's happening or not, it's happening. Like, people are dead, so like, don't do that, please. That that idea, and the idea of entitlement for customers, where you guys have trained me to come to you for everything. Now I'm entitled because I pay my bill for you to help me with everything. So
Right. Yeah.
you need to fix it. And I was like, kind of like what you said earlier. These are my options. I can only give you a couple things. Which one do you want? And if you don't like any of them, I'm sorry, I still can't do anything for you. And that is very rough, where when you're put in that situation and your hands are kind of tied with everything. And between just like the blatant disregard that some people have and that sense of entitlement, those are really the two worst things, because it's not just that worst experience or that worst interaction. It's such an overarching thing that we've done as a company to ourselves.
Are there any particular moments, customers, experiences that like stand out for you, where it was just like, I can't believe this is happening, like this is surreal, like, you know?
I remember helping a very older lady with her phone and trying to fix it for her, and then next thing I know, she's throwing it at me. So that's
Why? What?
she was just mad because I couldn't fully fix it, and she was like, "You take it, I'm done," and then walked out. And I was like, "All right, I guess that's cool." Yeah, so that I think that one sticks with me more because I was legitimately like trying to help her, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
next thing I know, she's just so mad at me for no reason. And I was just like, "This is ridiculous."
It's kind of
Um,
nuts how people switch sometimes, isn't it? Like you can literally
yeah,
just be talking normally, like, yeah, okay, so this would be the rate for this, and then suddenly, fuck you. Okay.
yeah. One of my other favorite moments is, this was a few years back, not a few years, a little while ago, because that was before I quit drinking. So
Oh,
I was at a
congrats.
thank you. I was at a bar, and the bartender was asking what I did for a living, and I told her, I work for the cell phones, and I work at this company. And the dude on the other side of the bar was just like, "Fuck your company," and I was like, "All right, man, appreciate it, like, thanks." And then he left. Like, I was talking to the bartender, and he had left, and I didn't even pay attention to it. So I go to pay my tab, and he paid it for me because he felt so bad. And I was just like, "Sorry that company did that to you. I'm just a dude, but that sucks. I got a free meal out of it, so that's cool, but that sucks."
You mentioned in that that you'd quit drinking. Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Yeah. So I quit drinking about 4 or 5 years ago. I think,
Nice.
because
Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
thanks. Yeah, time is a construct, so I don't understand how long it's been, but
That's a great analogy, by the way. Great way to put that. This is, yeah, can be more true.
so it got out of hand pretty a lot, and what I noticed is I would have a great time out with people, and then when I get home, it was a completely different story, and I was just spending way too much money. So I think like the night before I fully quit, I spent like $300 at a bar, and I was like, I'm not fucking doing that again. Um, but I had blacked out, and then woke up in the middle of trying to commit suicide, and
Oh,
then
wow. Okay.
yeah.
Were
So
you, were
that
you, I know how this will sound, but were you kind of like consciously aware that you were trying to do this? Or was it kind of like you wake up and you're kind of like, what the fuck am I doing kind of situation?
that right there, like having the whole like bit in my hand and going for The wrist was
Oh
enough
wow.
to just like, holy shit, I don't need to do this, and I threw everything away, and then I was just like, all right, well, I guess I'm not drinking again, because that just scared the shit out of me. So yeah, that because I always thought for me growing up that it's such like a selfish thing and a
Hmm.
silly thing to do that, to like take your own life, and then I've drastically changed my view over the years, right?
Right.
You had mentioned losing friends. I've lost a few of them too, and just it really is kind of like what we touched on before, that stoicism where you can't
Mm.
really talk about your feelings, and if you can, sometimes it's just like an echo chamber, and you can't stop your own thoughts sometimes, and all of that. This year I'm taking even more seriously, and trying to seek a little bit of treatment for it. So
So like, how did you actually overcome it? Because obviously, it's a process, and there's different ways to sort of tackle it and stuff. And the interesting thing that I found in what you were saying is that you decided, you're like, I have a problem, I need to deal
yeah,
with this. Right now, some people realize that later. Some people get told by others, "Hey, you got a problem," um, and some people, have other people kind of put them in the right direction with it,
right.
but whether that be like rehab or therapy or whatever the case may be. But it kind of sounds like you were at least in the driver's seat, like, okay, I'm gonna steer this ship. I'm gonna take some steps. So like, what kind of steps did you take? And yeah, talk us through that journey of like
Sure.
getting through that and then coming out the other end.
So the biggest thing for me is legitimately like scaring the shit out of myself. Like that that right there was like, this is a major problem, and I can't do this anymore. And if I look back, I should have saw way more signs where like driving on the wrong side of the road should have stopped me before this, and it didn't. So
Okay.
there's a couple things in there where I think in probably that year before I quit, that it was getting so out of control that if I would have got like a DOI or something, that probably would have shook me, but that didn't happen. So then it just spiraled more out of it.
Mm.
And so with me, the first morning after that, I was just like, fuck it, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And I remember visiting my parents and telling them, and they were just like, "Fuck off! You're coming day drinking with us." And I was like, "All right, I guess."
Ooh.
So
Okay.
I got my revenge because they live in North Carolina in the mountains where it can get pretty hot in there, and I liked the darker beers. So for me, I was drinking all the darker beer that they don't really sell that much of anyway, and then just the heat got to me, so I just threw up all over their house in their
Oh
bathroom.
no. I should
So
laugh,
that
but that is kind of a weird sense of revenge.
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, so I threw up, slept, threw up again, slept more. So it was a great vacation. Um,
What? Sorry, that level of sarcasm just hit me out of nowhere.
but so I think the biggest thing for me is making it known that, hey, I'm not doing this anymore.
Mhm.
Outside of that little blip, you know, and after talking to them and making sure that they understand how
Mm.
serious I am and all that stuff, because it was so fresh after that, and I never talked to them really about what happened and why until a little bit later. So for me, it was really that decision, but also everybody around me being okay with it. So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with connections and growing relationships, to where you can trust the people that are around you, and no matter what you're going through and your decision, they'll support you for it. And for me too, like concerts were always a big part of my life, and
Of
being able to
course, yeah, yeah.
go to a concert and not have to have a drink was amazing, because I was always there for the music, and that just solidified me to say, okay, if I can not drink in this environment, I can not drink anywhere else. So I'm totally fine at that point, where I had thought about doing AA, and I thought about doing this other stuff. One, I'm not religious, and it does like going through those different steps and that program for me makes it feel disingenuous a little bit.
Oh, so is the AA program like really religious program then, or is it just?
It started off in Christianity, and a lot of the steps that you have to go through that is
Yeah.
very much a Christian setup. So you're looking at, you know, asking for forgiveness, going through the steps of penance and stuff like that, and being humble and learning humility and all this other nonsense, which I have a I have a full grasp of it for myself. Like I know when I fucked up. I can say that, but
Oh, fair play, man.
yeah. But it was something where I was just super appreciative of everybody around me, and just their immediate acceptance of, okay, this is what we're doing now. It's totally cool. Like, we all know how much of a degenerate you were, but that's fine. We got you. You're gonna try to clean up your act. That's great.
Did they kind
And
of say that in such words, like kind of like to sort of?
no, they were nicer. These were just the thoughts that I had in my head.
Oh,
They
okay, wow, all right, yeah. So like they might say something, but it felt for you like a lot worse, kind of thing.
yeah, like that. They were always very supportive, and I always wanted to make sure that I made that known, that I appreciate it so much, and have those conversations with the people that matter. But there was always that part of my head, and I was like, this could spiral at any time.
Mm.
So if I don't like keep my act together and keep leaning on these people, then I can turn into that person before, and I don't want to do that. So
See, this is an important thing I think that we might have missed before, is that it's important to talk about the fact that you do become a different person if you're on drugs, alcohol, whatever. Like I've experienced it. I remember one time at university, I drank a bunch of random stuff, you know,
yeah,
mixing and stuff, and I don't remember this, but apparently I was running around my halls shouting the C word at everyone, banging on people's doors, screaming. Like, I don't remember any of that.
yeah,
And it's kind of scary. It made me realize, like, hey, you know, this it might be fun to have a drink every once in a while, but like this can change you, like, so
yeah,
that you're not in the driver's seat anymore. And that for me was like, oh no, fuck that. I want to be in control. I don't want to have
yeah,
something control me.
yeah. That sense of control is a big thing that I try to not take for granted now. Um, I've used pot a little bit this past year because I have a bulging disc in my back that's pain all the time. So I'm trying different stuff to manage that.
Mm.
But as soon as like that first experience with it, I was just like, this is probably not for me, because that lack of control. And if you've done it for like 4 or 5 years where you don't have any kind of substances in you at all, and now you're just looking around and being like, what am I putting into my body? Why does this not feel great? What is happening? It was a very interesting process for me, knowing that I have a sense of control if I just don't do this.
Yeah.
And what do I like more? Do I like clarity? Do I like being able to be productive? Can I just take Tylenol? Is that going to be okay for me at the moment? You know, there's a couple of different things, and you can use like topicals where it doesn't actually get you high or anything. So that's what I've been using. I've been trying to use it way more as like a legit medicine rather than an escape that some people use. So immediately once I felt that again, I was like, I probably don't want to do this all the time. And it is definitely still a struggle for me though, because sometimes I like that feeling. So I've seen myself where I have in spurts I've treated marijuana as I treated the liquor that I
Yeah.
had before, where I can just do that all day, every day, and become a vegetable, I guess, if I want to. But there is always that voice inside me and being like, you can do better. It's okay. Like, you don't have to just do this all the time. You can actually do other shit because you've proven to yourself that you can. So
Absolutely. And just what you were saying with regards to the productivity thing, I totally agree with that. I feel exactly the same. Like I barely ever drink.
yeah,
like, and I love to party, have a good time, like just like every other person. But like, yeah, like I've noticed, like especially I don't know if it's an age thing, but like these days, if I drink, I get drunk, I lose the next day.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not necessarily even a hangover, because I know what hangover is. Hangover is a hangover. Like, I just have this like every time, like this body draining. It's I think it's just extreme hydration or whatever, but it's like you can't do anything. That
Yeah.
day is gone, and that's a wasted day. And like you say, I mean, it's borrowed time. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
we're not gaining any time, we're losing it. So do you want to spend your days feeling like shit, or do you want to do you know what I mean? Like these days, especially since I'm working a lot more, doing a lot more stuff, there's not really any room for that in my life. And these days, I go like once in a blue moon, okay, I'll have some drinks with some friends, whatever. But like, I'd take it or leave it. I'd rather sit and eat like cheese or something. Yeah, that's way better. Cheese is dangerous, people, by the way. Just say that shit's like heroin.
Yeah. The issue is when you still like it, but it doesn't like you. So
yeah, that's true.
As I've gotten older, it's hated me more and more, and I like it more and more, and it makes me sad. But one of the things I think now too is that people are way more open to talk about it.
Yes.
And I was talking to a few friends a few weeks ago where one of them had blacked out and did something that they didn't even know turned into a completely different person, right? And then the other person, they can see that they're having a problem, and the staying at home has compounded that problem.
Right.
So they're trying to figure out, what their next step is supposed to be, right? So do they say, yeah, this is enough, like I need to stop this, or I still kind of have it under control? They have to figure that out for themselves. I think the other thing too, like the productivity part and like what you just talked about as far as like taking advantage of the day, right? So I've started waking up way earlier, like 7:30 for this year, and trying to steal back my time.
Yeah.
Because just like what you were talking about, if I'm not working, I'm doing something usually podcast related. And if I'm not doing either of those, I'm usually sleeping. So that time for yourself isn't really there. And that time for others is definitely not there, because your priorities are different. So that kind of regresses you in any kind of social aspect of it, and then regresses you a personal development part, because you're not able to have those experiences to enhance those conversations either. So you can, and this is what I think about like all the time is, am I stagnant? And if I'm stagnant, how am I contributing to these conversations based off my past? Because my past isn't going anywhere, but I can. So if I can go experience this stuff and have these different connections and all that, why aren't I to be able to help these overall connections? And, just going out to nature, like enjoying yourself outside.
Yep.
Maybe you should start doing that. And so I've been trying. It hasn't worked out yet, but
everyone has their thing. I think that's key. Like for some people it's boxing, some people it's exercising, for other people it's reading. I don't know. There'll always be something for you personally that works, and I think that's kind of key in that. But in terms of like when you were giving it up, did you do it like cold turkey, or did you do it in steps? Like sometimes like when people are quitting smoking, they'll cut down and stuff. Like, what was your approach?
When I cut smoking, that's exactly what my approach was. It was cutting down over time, because at one point I was smoking like 3 or 4 cigarettes a week, and then my mom was just like, just quit. What are you doing? Your cigarettes are going stale, all of this stuff. Just quit. If you're not smoking a whole pack, you're not doing it right. So
okay. Be an addict or don't be an addict. Just stop wasting my time.
Exactly. With the alcohol, it was definitely that cold turkey aspect of it, and that cold turkey of, I can't do this anymore because I will die if I continue to do this.
Right. Yeah.
And again, immediately after that, like immediately after I got that message out to everybody else, it was cool. So it was easy for me to be cold turkey for the most part and just like miss Jameson and miss Guinness, but it wasn't something that was such a pulling force. So I didn't feel the need to go back to it. Other people aren't as lucky, I think, as
Yeah.
me, and don't have that same mentality. They can go through some of the stuff that I went through, but they can take it completely different and maybe use that stuff more as a crutch, where I found it as a huge detriment, and that was one of the reasons why everything was going south for me when I was alone drinking, because all those thoughts that I would have normally, where I can combat those with logic and brain and different words, all those feelings are just let loose and just they're in your head and there's nothing stopping it. So being able to recognize that and know that I have to be in control, because if I'm not in control, it's going to be a bad time for me and everybody else around me. And just that support system helped me for sure. It's not easy for everybody else, and when I try to like give any kind of advice to anybody, it's really just like find the people that support you the most and make it easy for you to keep doing your own path, because if you choose correctly, then they're going to support you in any way possible and do what's better for you all the way through. So those are also the people that you care about, and those are the ones that you want to invest in because they're investing so much in you. If it is someone that is like, "Oh, dude, no, come on in. You can have a couple brews. It's fine." That's probably not the person that you want
Yeah.
to associate with anymore, unfortunately. And you can kind of see that maturation and that perspective change over time for sure.
Listen, I want to say a massive thank you for sharing that. I know a lot of people, I know it's not easy to talk about.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for that. And I think a lot of people in, listening will either be able to relate or will find some sort of, you'll find it inspiring because, I did. And I think it's amazing to be able to kick. I've heard a lot of stories over the years. I have personal experience from family and friends, so I know it's not something that you can just do.
Right.
It's a tough thing. It's a mental and physical battle. So I think, well done, you man. Thank you,
Oh,
thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks. I really think too that it's just a social acceptance of it, and that has changed with the generations that are out now.
Mm-hmm.
Just like what we kind of talked about with that emotional acceptance in there, and being able to articulate and talk about this stuff, that sense of safety there to be able to actually take care of yourself is very, very important. And that hasn't been a thing for so long, where, that stoicism, quote unquote, toxic masculinity and all that stuff,
Yeah,
that's where it is a long time ago. That's not where it is now. And if we can keep progressing towards that and having these conversations, then we can hopefully just use this stuff to be okay. And like what the commercials say, actually drink in moderation or use the stuff in moderation, because it can get out of control quick.
I actually think that the legal classification of alcohol is a big issue behind this because if you really think about it, like it should be illegal.
Yeah.
When you think about it, when you look at the damage that it does to the body, how it affects people in comparison to say like marijuana, right?
Yep.
There's always been this argument that, well, they should legalize marijuana and if anything, get rid of alcohol, right? And I think that because it's legal, maybe people's perception of it over the years hasn't been taken seriously because, well, it's legal and, you just have to, be careful and blah, blah, blah. But now people realize the damage and what it can do. And now that it's taken seriously in connection with everything else in life that is has negative things associated with it,
Yeah.
like you say, people do take it seriously, and I think that as long as that continues, then we should be headed in the right direction, and hopefully people won't be addicted anymore.
Right. Well, it's that taking mental illness seriously. It's
Yes.
taking that depression seriously. It's taking that anxiety, but also knowing the signs for that, right? So knowing, okay, this person is drinking every night by
Right.
themselves. They're battling something. What are they battling? We need to find that out, right? Or they're binging at the bar and getting kicked out every night or every week. What is going on? Is
Mm.
it something, you know, distinctly emotionally messed up with them? Are they using it as a coping mechanism? What's going on? We need to figure that out. So if we can get back to the source of it and the root of it and actually treat that stuff and just that acceptance of, oh yeah, that's actually a thing, let's figure this out, rather than, oh yeah, just be a man, it's okay, you don't have to cry or anything, be a man, it's fine, walk it off. So if that mentality continues to shift, like what you said, we're going to be good.
Absolutely. Moving it forward, what are the best and worst things about living in Baltimore, Maryland?
Well, the first thing is I'm about an hour and a half south of Baltimore. So Maryland is a dumb state. So it's shaped like an L and like a upside down L. So you can be when people think of Maryland, they only think about like DC, Baltimore area. But you can still be in Maryland and be way down south because it like has this really long strip of land that is stupid because there's only like one or two ways in and out of the state. So with that being said, Baltimore is cool. It got some really good music, food, and all that good stuff up there. Um, I don't care about baseball or really football, so that's lost on me. Um, I try to go to DC for hockey games. That's
Okay.
that's my bread and butter. But what you'll see is Maryland is really weird because the cities that are there are full cities, but most of the stuff that's around here is very rural and suburban. So it's a complete back and forth between like what we have down where I live is way more spread out. Everything takes 15, 20 minutes to get to via car. Everybody has to have a car. You can't just like hop on the bus or anything because most of the buses are commuter buses to Baltimore or DC. So that right there makes it to where you have to, if you're an adult, you have to be pulling in a decent amount of money to just live. And if you're not, then you have to share your space with a bunch of different people and you're not going to really like it. So I like it for the most part. It's tough down than where I'm at for creatives and artists and musicians because there's no real place for them to play other than those cities. Where
Mm.
if we're an hour and away, that's tough for them to be able to develop their own regional stuff and then go up to a bigger market and try to make a stab at that. So when you look at bands that are maybe from this area, a lot of them will always talk about they're from DC or Baltimore instead because that's what anybody knows, right? So, and they try to hook on to the bigger cities and the regional part of it. There's a lot of mom and pop shops down here, but there's also tons of corporate chains. And battling those two things is you can see the mom and pops being eaten up by the bigger corporations and like the mail or chain malls and restaurants and stuff. So that's been a little disconcerting for me. For me, I always try to shop local and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I again with even with the podcast, like I've interviewed a few local businesses, and that's what I still want to be able to do, like shine a light more on those. And I think the other biggest thing in this area is that there's so many people doing great things, and so many people that are doing stuff that isn't even in this state, but they're from here, they live here. And like I said, Justin was on Disney cruises and going to Australia and doing all this other stuff. You have people that are lobbying for real change in the daycare system and all this other stuff that we have going on, that we have MMA fighters that are around here that are trying to break through. Like all of that is here, but it's so quiet because people don't think about this area at all. They think Baltimore and DC, and there's Virginia, but I don't know anything about Maryland at all. So I think it's a little diamond in the rough for the most part, but if it can develop correctly, which it hasn't yet, so and this place has been around for way too long, then we'll be fine. But if they keep doing more of the big residential areas and more of the chain malls and more of the chain stores, all the little charm that we may or may not have down here is going to go. And that's going to be a sad day for sure.
Yeah, we have a similar problem here in the UK. Kind of hoping that we'll be able to turn that around. I mean, for instance, us being in lockdown sort of perpetually throughout this last year has really affected like our pubs and local businesses and stuff. Many of them have had to just close down, and the pubs in the UK, it's like synonymous with our culture. So it does make me concerned for the future. But yeah, I mean, you just can't. You can't feel that way about a fucking Starbucks, can you? But you can you can feel a connection to a local business because it's like, you know, you grow up with it and you maybe you get to know the family that runs it and whatever. It's part of a community. It's really important.
Yeah, you also know that your money is going back into the people that actually live here.
Yes.
And can invest. Like there's a music shop here that I interviewed the owner of, where he does a concert every October. He wasn't able to do it last year, obviously, because of the pandemic. But, you know, what he'll do with that concert is take that money that he might raise from that and donate it directly to the county school system. So having that person in there that can make an actual bigger change is so important. And for it to be a local business owner rather than a corporation just writing a check and writing that off, you know, it means more, so that community builds around it. And if you don't have that sense of community, it's just another place to live. You know, you can live anywhere. You don't have to be here. You can probably live somewhere cheaper. You can go to the Midwest and be just fine because there's fuck all over there. So that's the other part about it, is that everything on the East Coast of America is very scrunched up, so you have to just find pockets of freedom in there, of like these rural areas, because if you go up and down the coast, like there's town upon town upon town. So
crazy, man. Shifting it forward, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned in life so far?
For me, and I'm still working on it, is being more confident in your own self. So I've reached out to people and landed interviews that I never thought I would land because of cold opens and just there not being any kind of connection beforehand. And what I'm trying to still work on is saying, okay, I am good enough to reach out to whoever I want to, right? I am good enough for whatever position that I'm going for. I am good enough to talk about this stuff. I am good enough to lead. So combating those negative feelings and thoughts of never being good enough, of never having that in there, and actually talking to myself logically. That's one of the biggest things that I've learned, is that if you can combat all this negativity and all this anxiousness with you, if you can just think about all the good things that you've actually done. And if you think about that and your skill set for it, that will hopefully overcome everything else.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
And I just want to say a massive thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. And as we sort of draw this all to a close, my last question for you is, do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd wish to share with us today?
I think the final thought that I'll share is that people are people, and they're not these crazy, out of reach folks, especially nowadays where everybody is clamoring to do something, don't be afraid to reach out to anybody for anything. So if you want to do something creative and you're afraid to reach out for help, don't be, because there's going to be someone that will be willing to help you. And that anxiety and that fear of yourself shouldn't be there. And once you get a little bit of that reinforcement, you'll be fine. As far as any other projects going up, it's just the show. I'll be releasing an episode this week. I don't know when this comes out, but I'm going back to weekly episodes. So usually every Thursday, just as long as I can keep up with the multitude of ones that I have recorded that I haven't started editing yet. So we'll see.
Oh no, he's got a backlog. That's the worst.
There's so much. What I found is that I can be cool with a backlog, because then I can take time from not talking to anybody and work on it at my own pace.
Right,
That's cool. But when I look at the fact that I have 6 or 7 of them, I'm like, shit, I need to get to work. And that's a daunting task and a daunting feeling.
You'll have it done in no time, man. Yes, and yeah. Massive thank you for agreeing to be on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. And
appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, to my listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, make sure you go check out Chris Tondevold and his podcast, Ambition Radio Podcast. Go check that out. It's an excellent podcast. And wish you the best of luck with that. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone listening on, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to the Christian Reeve Podcast. Make sure that you're liking and sharing the videos, following, giving us ratings, whatever the case may be. All of that stuff, as I always say at the end of every podcast episode, is invaluable. So with your support, it's going to help me push things forward. And, I haven't said this in a couple of episodes, so I should say it, if there are any particular guests you'd like to see on the podcast or particular topics you'd like to hear, let me know. My DMs are open. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know who you'd like to see, what you'd like to hear. Thank you very much for listening. And until next time, peace out, one love. I'll see you in the next one.